remind everyone that the POI, you are allowed to raise a POI in not in the first minute and not in the last minute of the debater speaking. So anytime between that is fine. So if you raise a POI within the first minute, I shall not accept it. And if you raise it after at the last minute, again, I will not accept it. I will also, it's my discretion as the chair to decide which POI to accept. And so far, I think I've been fair in that I've given everyone an opportunity to raise a POI. This House believes that students who are perpetrators of bullying, including cyberbullying, should be viewed as victims of mental health illness who need psychological help. And for the proposing delegation, we have Zambia and we have Uganda as the opposing delegation. I'll now hand over to the first speaker from the proposing delegation. Remember to tell us your name. The time starts now.
Good morning, House of Intellectuals. Welcome to this debate session. For debate time is knowledge time. For every complicated topic needs a complicated mind to decomplicate that which is complicated by the complicator. Thus, with a complicated mind, you simplify into its simplicity to a simple and perfect audience by accentuating the motion that stipulates as I articulate, and I quote, "This House believes that students who are perpetrators of bullying, including cyberbullying, should be viewed as victims of mental health illness who need psychological help." End of quote. House of Intellectuals, my name is Suilanji Sinkonde. As a proposing delegation of Zambia, we have come with a message standing firm and strong to declare that perpetrators should not only be addressed as perpetrators, but instead as victims. House of Intellectuals, if we definitely do that, we would definitely make sure that we win the fight against bullying in the countries. House of Intellectuals, but being the first speaker in this notion, icebreaker, allow me to articulate the important keywords that have been highlighted in the motion. Perpetrator, someone who has committed a crime or violence or harmful acts. Mental health, a person's condition with regard to physiological or emotional well-being. Bullying, this is the aggressive behavior as a result to dominate something. House of Intellectuals, to prove that I am a girl who speaks within and not without the boundaries of debate. For further clarification, may the chairperson actually look for further clarification in the Oxford Dictionary. House of Intellectuals, now moving on to my first point. Perpetrators should be treated as victims instead of being viewed as perpetrators, because there are growing minds who are actually going through a lot in life, and as they are
1 minute.
Copy that thing that is taking place in life. House of Intellectuals, let's stop painting perpetrators black. Instead, let's paint them white, because they face depression and anxiety. And due to that, we must make sure that we try and paint them white by looking at the main root cause of what is taking place. Let's not just look at the victim of what they're facing, but what made the perpetrator to do that. For we all know, members of this house, it is important to keep in mind that every situation happens due to a cause of something that happened. House of Intellectuals, in my conclusion, opposing to such a motion would be like sitting on a needle and pretending to be comfortable. House of Intellectuals, I believe with a few convincing and not confusing points, I strongly rest my case.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll now invite the first speaker from the opposing delegation from Uganda.
All protocol observed. My name is Kaboyo Nicole, first speaker, Team Uganda. So I commend the first speaker from Team Affirmative for giving us the beauty of bullying, but she does not actually talk about what the problem is. Now, I will take you through what bullying in itself is. For starters, what is bullying in today's debate? We are looking at forms of physical, psychological. We are looking at various forms of violence against an individual. And in this case, since we are looking at students, this house believes that students, we are looking at a place that is supposed to be a safe school environment. So at a point in time where bullying is prevailing in a cycle that is continuous, the question at the end of the day is which team best presents a solution that caters for everyone at hand, in this case, both the perpetrators and the victims. So what we get from her speech entirely is one, that these perpetrators are going to be viewed as victims. So in their world, they are creating a narrative. But before I go into that, we also need to first assess what, in this case, bullying looks like. So for starters, bullying in this case could be physical, it could be verbal, social, it also be as a racial form of bullying, sexual, and even disability. Now, including cyberbullying, which is stated in our resolution, we are looking at cyberbullying in this case as one of using messages on social media, emails, text messages to frighten, threaten, or upset someone. So in this case, with that framing in today's debate, is it then justified to view these perpetrators as victims in the fight against bullying? And in this case, the aspect of psychological help. You see, time and again, we realize that in a modern society, we find that there are forms of psychological help, which they do not characterize in their entire speech. What we need to also take into concern is that, first of all, we do not disagree with the idea of psychological help. But what we advocate for as Team Negative is a sustainable mechanism, and rather one that is effective in fighting against bullying, given the continuous cycle of bullying as we know. Now, for example, we find that according to UNESCO, 1 out of 3 children experience bullying on a monthly basis. Furthermore, bullied children are 3 times more likely to feel out of place in school. So what does this mean exactly? That their entire approach as Team Affirmative is looking at a sugar-coated aspect of fighting against bullying. See, in this case, we are pampering the actual perpetrators. We are not bringing in a solution that has a comprehensive approach and takes care of both the victims and the perpetrators. Furthermore, we're looking at the trickle-down effect. Why? We find that the aspect of doing wrong requires individual responsibility of that wrong. If one is not held accountable for their wrong, we find at the end of the day, with this narrative of them being victims, we are creating a stereotype that accommodates more wrongdoers, and in this case, bullies. And at the end of the day, we are not solving anything. Furthermore, we find that even these victims themselves require more of the psychological help than the perpetrators. Why? Because at the end of the day, there is no way a victim is actually going to recover from the trauma of the bully. But another thing that we would like to put across is that the harm principle itself looks at what these bullies do at the end of the day. At the end of the day, we need... Oh, I beg to rest my case.
Timekeeper, I will penalize you. Remember, you have to warn us a minute before time. All right, thank you so much, Team Uganda. I will now go back to Zambia with the second speaker from the proposing side.
Good morning to the Chamber of Assembled Intellectuals. My name is Crystal Walia from the proposing delegation of the motion that has been stated by my former speaker. Now, I am going to talk about why bullies bully, because I stand firm. Before I go into my first point, allow me to give you some points of information. We believe that these perpetrators that have been long called perpetrators should be viewed as victims, because bullying is indeed a coping mechanism. When you look at some of the causes of bullying, you find that it is because of low self-esteem. It is now a coping mechanism for the low self-esteem.
We'll pause the time. Team Zambia, maybe you can turn off the video if that would be better. Team Zambia, you're muted on Zoom. Please unmute. We've lost you.
Team Zambia, you are muted on Zoom. Team Zambia, you are muted on Zoom.
IT team for Team Zambia, please, could you unmute on Zoom?
Must be viewed as...
Excuse me. Chair, we seek your indulgence. We lost connectivity. Is that okay?
Yes, and we paused the time, so now you can restart.
So are you able to hear her?
Yes, we can
Hello?
hear you. Yes, we can hear her.
Great.
Good morning to the Chamber of Assembled Intellectuals. My name is Crystal Walia from the proposing delegation of the motion that has been stated by my fellow speaker. Allow me to give some points of rebuttal to what was raised by the opposition. We are not saying that these victims are being sugar-coated and we are looking at a sweet side of what they are doing. We are saying that they are victims of mental health illnesses and it is not their fault that they are undergoing these coping mechanisms in form of bullying. It is not their fault that they are suffering, that they are suffering from this condition of bullying. I'll give an example of narcissistic personality disorder. We have all heard the saying that hurt people do indeed hurt people. If someone is a narcissist, they do have an absence of empathy, fragile self-esteem. How then can you expect someone with fragile self-esteem to cope with those things? How then can you then go ahead and blame them for the things that they are doing when it is a condition? If a child is born with HIV and AIDS from their mother, do you blame the child for having HIV? If someone has a condition, will you blame them for having that condition? Instead, you rush to offer help to them. You will rush to help them, and that you will rush to give them that psychological help, which is what we as the proposition are advocating for. These people, the bullies, are on trial, and we are indeed advocating for them by saying that they are victims of mental health illnesses.
1 minute.
I will then pass this over to the judges for further verification. Another mental health disorder that they could be suffering from is oppositional deficit disorder, which then shows them that indeed these people are suffering from mental health illnesses, mental health conditions that do need them to get help. They need the psychological help. In the same way you would rush to help someone suffering from trauma, in the same way you would rush to help someone who is suffering in a funeral, same way you would rush to help them is the same way you should rush to help these bullies, these victims who are indeed suffering and crying out in their own way, in a poor coping mechanism, which we have not yet addressed. The opposition is blaming us and saying that we are sugarcoating, but we are actually trying to help them to get help. With these few points, I rest my case.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll cross over to Uganda for the second speaker from the opposing side. Unmute, please, IT Uganda, kindly unmute.
Good morning. My name is Okalebo Joe Caesar from Team Opposition Uganda. Now, the first affirmative talked of complicating issues in this debate, and she clearly complicated her own case. Now, the first Prime Minister says that perpetrators should be viewed as victims. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this clearly goes against the resolution itself because we are entirely looking at the perpetrators themselves. So even if we were to view them as victims, meaning we shall not have victimizers at the end of the day, meaning bullying shall not occur, which is largely hypothetical, ladies and gentlemen. So they claim that they are fighting for mental health, but in the long run, they're actually fighting mental health itself. Because as you may realize, there is a large number of the people who are bullied than the number of people who are bullies themselves. Meaning, in the long run, we shall have a large number of people opened up bullying and violence who will suffer from mental health, and meaning they will be fighting mental health itself, ladies and gentlemen. So they come and tell us that bullies end up bullying because of the low self-esteem. This is completely a lie, because according to such, bullies have higher self-esteem. And what is self-esteem in this case, ladies and gentlemen? Self-esteem is mainly having confidence. So you can't tell us that someone who doesn't have confidence can go
Point
ahead
of
and hit someone,
information,
ladies and gentlemen.
may the
This
speaker
is a lie,
pause,
ladies
may the
and
speaker
gentlemen.
pause, may the speaker pause the time. Point of information from Zambia.
Members of this auditorium, the current speaker is not audible enough and we cannot get his articulations.
All right,
Now,
so that's more like a point of order.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Now, moving on to our own argument. We think that deterrence is crucial in this debate, and what shows that deterrence has worked? Because according to the UN report of 3rd June 2023, South Africa had laws implemented already to combat cyberbullying, and it has seen a gradual reduction caused by 3%, ladies and gentlemen. We look at the China setting anti-bullying laws, and we also see it actually achieve a reduction in the bullying rates. We also look at Belgium doing the same and achieving the same reduction, ladies and gentlemen. So we actually look at the fear of consequences as a deterrent measure to actually combat this. Because as you may realize, many people, due to fear of consequences, they go ahead not to do some issues, ladies and gentlemen. So you agree to the need and actually respect. You actually have to agree to the need and respect to acknowledge the rule of law in this debate. So if we have actually set up rules and regulations plus laws, set laws governing bullying, we should actually go ahead and acknowledge them and respect them by implementing them. In the long run, we shall actually achieve our goal of deterrency. Ladies and gentlemen, now we also look at the point that perhaps if affirmatives were trying to say that nothing to do, maybe that affirmatives are trying to tell us that by taking them as victims themselves, it means that we have nothing to do about bullying. And all we have to do is to actually live with it and take them as mentally ill people, which is actually wrong, ladies and gentlemen, because we have rules and regulations, we have state laws, we have the UN Anti-Bullying Act that we can actually follow and end up combating bullying in our societies, ladies and gentlemen. Now, let us look at balancing support and accountability. Yes, we agree psychological hope may be of a great deal to everyone, ladies and gentlemen. But in the long run, we need to actually put these people accountable and responsible for their acts. Meaning, if they actually perpetuate the act of bullying, then they should actually go ahead to face the necessary consequences that come with bullying itself, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we shall give them the mental health if they need it. We shall give them the psychological help because they actually need it. Everyone needs it.
Your time is up. Thank you so much, Team Uganda. Your time is up. We'll now move on to the third speaker from the proposing delegation.
Good morning, designated members of this auditorium. Before you here is Martha Chiba Chapuswike, coming from the Zambian team, strongly proposing to the motion that states as I articulate. Perpetrators of bullying, including cyberbullying, should be considered as victims of mental health illness who need psychological help. As the third speaker of the Zambian team, I'll be shedding more light on the psychological treatments that these bullies need. Firstly, better understand your own thinking and behavior. This can be done by using cognitive behavior therapy, CBD, which helps one identify and change thinking and behavior patterns that are unhealthy or ineffective, replacing them with more accurate thoughts and behavior. Secondly, understanding and resolving your problems. A psychiatrist can provide an accurate diagnosis and suggest treatment plans. The psychiatrist will work with the bully to determine treatment plans that are best for them. Coming to my third point, recognizing symptoms of mental illness in yourself. When one feels anxious and worried, depressed or unhappy, constantly having emotional outbursts, substance abuse, feeling guilty or worthless, having low self-esteem, and etc. These may be some of the things or signs one can acknowledge in themselves and seek help from appropriate authorities. Members of the auditorium, moving on to my next point, one can be helped to improve the quality of their life.
Point of information.
Point of information allowed.
Where would a person with low confidence get the confidence to attack the bullying, to attack the other person?
Please proceed.
It is a coping mechanism they use to fight their battles that they are battling with, which is mental health illness, which we are advocating for. As I was saying, we can also help the bully build their self-confidence and change to positive role models for others who may have likely fallen in the same situation of mental illness at hand. Coming to my fifth and last point, my final point is providing proper education about bullying and becoming a role model to students to help them distinguish good and positive behavior towards others from bad and negative behaviors towards others. With these few and strong and valid points, I rest my case.
Thank you. Thank you, Team Zambia. We now go back to Team Uganda for the third speaker.
Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Menyafiba Uthman, Team Uganda. Before I proceed uttering my arguments, I'll start by rebutting what has been said by the farmers. The first speaker said we should not blame bullies because they are going through a lot. I say every person is going through a lot. We should not use what we are going through as an excuse to bully or harass others. The second speaker said we should look at why bullies bully. But I say no reason justifies criminality. Poverty does not justify theft. So does depression, anxiety, stress don't justify bullying. She also speaks of people with HIV. We should not blame them. If a child has HIV, we don't blame them for having HIV, but we blame them if they infect others with the virus. So we don't blame bullies for having mental issues, but if they affect others, if they inflict pain, injuries on others, then they are liable to being blamed. The third speaker spoke of understanding their situations by the psychiatrist, but I pose a question. What guarantee do you have that the bully will open up to the psychiatrist? What guarantee do you have that the bully is ready to change or he's ready to follow the advice given to them by the psychiatrist?
Point of order.
I'll start giving my arguments.
Accepted. May you pause?
Point of order.
POI accepted.
House of Intellectuals, when we talk about, she gave a practical example of HIV. What she literally meant when she talked about that. When a person is having HIV, you rush to them. The same way you rush to them is the same way you must actually rush to a person who's actually a perpetrator. Because one thing, if we want to solve this issue, is that a perpetrator, there's a main reason why he's actually bullying others. Because maybe he was bullied by someone, or maybe depression. When we find the main root cause, this will actually help
Your
us.
30 seconds is up. Your 30 seconds is up.
Thank you. Thank you. She gave a practical example and I also gave a practical response. My first view, labeling perpetrators of bullying as victims of mental health illness provides them with an excuse to continue bullying others. According to African Parenting website, putting up excuses for criminality, e.g. bullying, gives a leeway to the development, promotion, and increase of the criminality. So applies to bullying. When excused with mental health illness, we are giving it a leeway to development, promotion, and increase. That's why we say perpetrators of bullying should be held accountable and should not be excused with reasons like mental health. My second argument, according to research conducted by the American Psychiatrists Association in June 2022, bullying is a rational choice, something that an individual commits out of his free will. Therefore, being a rational choice, the perpetrators should be held accountable and fully responsible for the repercussions of their actions. Yes, thank you. Also, dear chairperson, we should agree that prioritizing victims of bullying should be the fundamental element we look at. According to Mindblog organization, bullying has detrimental effects to the victims, e.g. trauma, depression, and anxiety. Dear chairperson, we should agree that it is the victims of bullying that need psychological support more than the perpetrators. Dear chairperson, putting up and enforcing strict laws against bullying should be prioritized. After Belgium launching an anti-bullying law, a 15% drop in bullying cases has been reported as of 2023. This proves that enforced anti-bullying laws can enable us to combat bullying, not sugarcoating bullying, not sympathizing with the criminals. Also, a report by the Whistleblowers Organization reveals that 47% of people diagnosed with mental issues have also been victims of bullying. This proves the point.
Your time is up. The time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, you are free to clap. We will move now to the last speaker and summarizer for the proposing delegation. You have 4 minutes.
Here from the Republic of Zambia is none other than Rashford Milambo, here to perfectly rectify, testify, specify, and justify to the bombastic motion which states, as I quote, "This House believes that students who are perpetrators of bullying, including cyberbullying, should be viewed as victims of mental health illness who need psychological help," end of quote. But before I raise my points, allow me to acknowledge the presence of all the faculty members in this august house, from the chairperson to the timekeeper. But due to time, allow me to say all protocols be highly observed. Now, members of this auditorium, as the last born of the proposing delegation, it is my duty to give you a brief highlight of what the Republic of Zambia enlightened you with by talking about drug abuse, which is the excessive intake of drugs. What do I mean? A study has shown that most bullies abuse drugs. And what does drug cause? Drug abuse will later lead to development of mental health illness such as schizophrenia. And if a person is undergoing a mental health illness such as schizophrenia, he will start doing complicated things such as having different moods, different interaction methods, and he'll end up bullying to actually cope with that illness. He may also not know that he's actually bullying the person, but he's coping to the illness, members of this auditorium.
POI accepted. POI accepted.
So thank you. In your world, if you view these perpetrators as victims, you are then guaranteeing them to be viewed as victims, yet they already pledged to the criminality of committing the crime of bullying. But furthermore, in that case, do you agree that when you start looking at them as mentally inadequate people, don't you think that you're spreading a stereotype that once I bully someone, I am mentally ill, which is not a guarantee for all cases?
The studies that I have shown have actually proven that most bullies are mentally ill. And members of this auditorium, if they're mentally ill, it means that they're going to bully others to cope with this issue, cope with their bullying. And members of this auditorium, what we do today can give us a better
Point of
tomorrow.
inquiry.
Point of inquiry accepted. Point of inquiry accepted.
So we need proof from proposition that the only way of determining people who are mentally ill is through their bullying actions.
Well, members of this auditorium, according to PubMed, it actually states that, and I'll give it to the masters of UNESCO to take a look at that later on. As I continue, I'll talk about social media, which is a platform of interactions, but it has now been changed to a place of cyberbullying and may also lead to symptoms of depression or stress due to the content that is posted on social media. And higher risks or higher content of posted on social media may lead to mental illnesses. And how will the person cope with it? By bullying others. He may not know. He may just try to be dominant to the others to cope with his things. He'll feel aligned from the other people and cope by bullying. But we will come in and give him psychological help to help that person. The psychological help that he needs is CBV, members of this auditorium. That is what we need, members of this auditorium, because actions express priorities, members of this auditorium. Next, we have to realize that bullies are actually victims of bullying. Most bullies actually become bullies because they are victims of it. They've undergone it and they now have a sense of revenge. That is also a mental health illness because the person is not thinking straight. The person is not in his original state. The person will start thinking of other things such as to hurt the person, bully the person, and do all sorts of things to the person that bullied him. What would that result in? Into bullying. But if we view that person as he is mentally ill, we're going to stop bullying because that is UNESCO's goal. Without the psychological help that they need, as long as they are viewed as bullies, members of this auditorium, or when I say as victims of mental health illnesses, members of this auditorium. Next, we also have to look at the background and cause of this bullying. It may be caused because of low self-esteem. The person comes from a background where there's no self-esteem to give him. He'll feel aligned, he'll feel depressed, he'll feel anxious. And what would that lead to? Him trying to be dominant, members of this auditorium, and then he'll bully others without him knowing, members of this auditorium, because his mind is not
1 minute, you have 1 minute.
And members of this auditorium, if his mind is not properly settled, these are the mental health illnesses that we are talking about, members of this auditorium. He will also be a narcissist, members of this auditorium. These are mental health illnesses that will later lead to bullying. This is why we should view bullies as victims of mental health illnesses, members of this auditorium. And we should view them because every achievement starts with a decision to try. If we try to view them as bullying, what is our goal? To end bullying. That's UNESCO's goal, that's Zambia's goal, that's the world's goal. But if we're not actually thinking smart enough to view them as bullies, we're not going to end bullying. This is why we have to view bullies as victims of mental health illnesses, members of this auditorium. We've got illnesses such as autism, illnesses such as narcissism. This is why we have to view them as victims of mental health illnesses.
Time up.
Allow me to make case.
Time up. All right, we will now cross over to the last speaker from the opposing side.
May I confirm I'm being heard?
Yes, and your time starts now.
Thank you so much. Janet Bambale is my name, Team Uganda. So Chair, this House believes that students who are perpetrators of bullying, including cyberbullying, should be viewed as victims of mental health illness who actually need psychological help. That is what entire affirmative present. This motion requires us to give a justification for a cause. This motion requires us to prove why that kind of justification is necessary. What side proposition debates is that actually these bullies are actually victims of bullying. So why we think then it is relevant to take opposition's case is because we do not have deterrent mechanism to actually avoid that kind of bullying from happening, but rather psychological treatment then has proved not to work, as what they are saying that because after being bullied, they still go ahead to bully. But secondly, they come and talk about the idea of stress, anxiety, and depression, but we actually question them on grounds of where a mentally ill person who has stress is actually going to get the courage to actually attack a fellow. That is a question that has not been answered in this debate. Secondly, they come and talk about the idea of providing proper education for bullying for the bullies. Understand that proper education exists. UNESCO has programs that actually underline such a programs
accepted,
into schools.
POI accepted. May the speaker pause? Please pause the time.
House of Intellectuals, recently someone talked about you are supposed to know the person, make them accountable. But how can you make a person who is sick accountable if they are not in the right state of manner?
So, Chair,
Proceed,
one
Uganda.
problem with side proposition is that they do not show us how that actually works out that someone who bullies is mentally ill. If you understand that at the point in time they bully, they are ill, why don't you actually deter that from happening? Why don't you treat them before they bully others? Rather than waiting for them to bully, then you take action. That is where the problem comes. Then after taking action, there is need for individual accountability for that particular action. Why? Because as side opposition, we think a just society is necessary. As side opposition, we think deterrence is necessary. As side opposition, we think that a society that is inclusive, a society that actually promotes responsibility for actions is necessary. So side proposition does not provide for that.
Please pause. POI accepted.
Members of this auditorium, for us to properly understand what the proposing delegation is saying, that for us to stop bullying, we have to view them as victims of mental health. And if they need psychological help, let's understand what psychological help is. It is the help that is given to a person who is not mentally thinking straight, a person who's got a different mood. So a bully is actually not thinking straight. You can't tell me that a person will just hit another person for the love of doing that. Even if he's doing it for the love of doing that, that is also him not thinking straight. That is a mental health illness that we're talking about, members of this auditorium. Mr. Chair, please do look for clear clarification.
So parts of forms of bullying include racial discrimination and sexual harassment. So tell us how that is then connected to the entire concept affirmative presents. But secondly, another thing that we seek to advance here is they do not show us how psychological help at the end of the day is going to end bullying. Yes, you're going to give them that therapy, but then we tell you where the problem comes is that you create a narrative of actually not of a responsible citizen, that what is going to happen is that if I become a bully, I'm going to be viewed as a victim of mental health. So that is not solving the problem. But we prove beyond reasonable doubt that countries like China that implemented laws actually deterring the crime, countries like South Africa actually receiving significant change in actually the bullying rate. So the reduction. So we think it is better time we take action. But what do we present from both sides, and who better answers the question of who deters best? So they do not show us a link of actually deterrency with actually kind of psychological impact or psychological help. But we actually show you that with the existence of laws, we have proof that laws actually are proved effective in actually deterring, because why people are always scared of being punished. But secondly, they do not show us a link between actually why a person who has self-esteem is actually going to bully, because why someone with low self-esteem is someone who is having no confidence. So we think that person has no courage to go on and bully. But again, most importantly, something they entirely do not engage is actually the point of power imbalance. That is from our first speech, that actually bullies in most cases are ones who are superior than the others. So if it was an issue of mental health, even those who are inferior would actually attack the superiors, but that is a rare case that rarely happens. So we think then that is justification enough that bullying is not as a result of stress or depression, because even the inferior have depression. But then, Chair, aside opposition, what we do, we show a mechanism that looks at deterrency. Though we do not disagree with psychological health being important, but what we disagree with is actually naming this or identifying bullies as victims of mental health, because why? That is going to actually create a society that is not just, and that is not going to create equality. So owing to the harm principle that exists, that harm caused to the person is irreversible, then a punishment ought to be actually subjected to the bully. So that kind of punishment, we do not disagree that these people may need rehabilitation, but for a fair and just society, that punishment is a necessity. So that is why we think with such a punishment, it is a better deterrent model. I submit.
Time up. Time up. Thank you so much. This brings us, you can give them a round of applause, all the speakers. This brings us to the end of the third round, and we'll take a minute this time for judges to confer. No, actually more. Let's take 5 minutes, because you need to give us the winners. And please, there's tea, coffee, and snacks outside. Feel free to just grab something.